So my cousin and I, along with her 8-year-old sister, were driving back to my place from their mum's house after spending 2 nights there for the Super Bowl and whatnot. It was this huge family event, and even though half of us don't watch football, all the in-laws of the family do. Now, I admit that when I'm driving, I get heated when there are idiots on the road. Not full-blown veer someone off the highway heated, but just heated. We hadn't been on the road for that long until a truck was seen a little ways onward. This dude was going unbearably slow in the fast lane too. Also, I need to note that this was around 12 AM and very few people were out driving. So I put on my right indicator attempting to move past this guy and go on my way, but as soon as I merge into the next lane in order to pass, the guy in front does the same thing and slams on his brakes. I remember hearing my cousins gasp in surprise, and I was so ticked off and startled that I swerved into the left lane while blaring my horn and giving the man the middle finger. Not even 10 seconds later, too, my cousin in the back says the man is coming to us really fast. The same dude who was going really slow before is now almost hitting the back end of my car. He's blaring on his horn, swerves his truck to the far left and tries to make me crash into the upcoming ditch, and we're all screaming in the car with my cousin in the passenger seat, shouting at me to take the next exit. The man is still following us and blaring his horn and tailgating me too. I was already pushing 90 at this point with a light up ahead, but I didn't want to slow down while this lunatic was behind me. We were coming up to the red light fast, and I swerved into the right lane while slamming on my brakes. My 10-year-old cousin in the back is wailing at this point, and honestly, I felt like I was going to cry too. The man, who I now saw clearly, looked like he hadn't showered in days. He had something in his left hand too, but I didn't see what it was. I was frozen in fear, like legit frozen, and I couldn't move. This has never happened to me before too, and all of those horror movies that I saw where the victims just didn't move, they make a lot more sense now. Anyway, he was already getting out of his car and coming straight towards me with his head pressed up on my window. The guy saw my cousin crying in the back and just shouted through the glass, "You're lucky there's a kid with you. If she wasn't in the back, both of you bitches would be dead for trying to pull that shit on me." The light goes green and the guy goes back to his truck with what I can now see is a baseball bat, and he just drives off. We all just sat there in silence, even with the light green, and I learned a valuable lesson that night. You never know who is behind the wheel of a car, and because of that, learn to let it go when someone pisses you off on the road. No horn blaring or middle fingers are worth it, and I guess my only excuse for the last night was just being extremely tired, and I just wanted to get back home in order to get up early to take my cousin to work. Her car is in the shop, and take my little cousin to school. We were really lucky that night, and I hope it never happens again. I was traveling alone through a foreign country at the age of 21. I'm a young female, and people often mistake me for being in high school, and was told that it would be too dangerous to do this, but I did it anyways. My favorite part of traveling alone is just sitting in parks, and I buy a snack from the bakery, and I have a good book with me, and I find a nice shady hidden area to just enjoy for hours. On this day, I was at the Central Park in the center of the city, and it was a gorgeous day, and the park was covered in bright flower bushes, and it made it easy to just find a place where not many people could see me. About an hour in, I saw 2 men whispering out of the corner of my eye, and they kept glancing towards me and talking in hushed tones. After about 10 minutes, they approached me too. One of the men took out a wallet type thing and opened it very quickly to show a police badge and some sort of identity card, but I didn't have time to see if the man's face matched it. He told me that they were policemen, which was really strange because they were wearing jeans and t-shirts like the rest of the people around me. They told me that they were doing a check of the citizens and needed to see my passport to prove that I was in this country legally. How did they know that I wasn't from there? Anyway, I didn't want to give them my passport, although I had it, so I gave them a copy of my passport. But they took the copy and walked off to talk in hushed tones again while I started to get worried. They came back and, in a really stern tone, asked me super personal questions. They also asked me if I was here alone, and I lied, and I told them that my boyfriend was waiting for me at the bus station. They asked me how long I was going to stay in the country for, and at what time I was supposed to meet my boyfriend. And after I had answered all of them, they told me the copy of the passport just wasn't going to be enough. They said that I had to go with them into their car to the police station. Now, this country was a Spanish-speaking country, and although I know Spanish, I still find it hard to navigate at times. I started to tell them that I didn't understand over and over again, and they got louder, and I stood up and started to walk towards the center of the park, and at this point, they were following me and yelling at me. They were telling me that I was about to be arrested, and they were telling me that I was going to be sent to jail, and I'm almost to the center at this point, and I keep repeating no, but louder and louder, and I can see an uninformed policeman in the distance, and I begin to cry, and I mean a big, ugly public cry, and the men, they're silenced at this point, and they hand me my copy of my passport back, and then they bolt and disappear into the park. So I'm in high school, final year, and we actually got an opportunity to go to France on a trip. It was our Duke of Edinburgh assessments. A group of kids my age, we all set up our tents. First day, we figured it would be best to put them in a row too, and there's a hedge by our openings, and facing the other way there's a few empty lots. A metal fence too, black with straight poles. So beyond that, there was a click or two of long grass, waist height, and then a mountain with an old war memorial at the top. We went up to the memorial that day, and it was pretty cool. There's a shop and a few rooms full of old guns and clothes, and then an old fortress used on the shoreline. I don't remember the exact location, but if I do, I'll try and update you guys. So, it was getting late, and our assessor invited us into his camper for some tea. I remember having hot chocolate too. We went back to our tents, got comfy, chatted with the tents still open. Must have been around 1 AM or so. And then we heard this noise, and I've never heard anything like it. Like the way a fox screams, but deeper and bassier. We dismissed it as a fox and carried on chatting, and next minute we heard it again, closer this time. Then the other guy in my tent pokes his head out and whispers loudly, telling us to look, quick. And I can only describe what I saw that day as just horrific. And it honestly makes me feel so weird just thinking about it, and I'm not sure why. Just a wrenching feeling, like I know it was bad or something. Anyway, it looked like a person, small, hunched over onto all fours, but it was quick. It ran through the fence, and it must have squeezed through the gaps, but it seemed like it just kind of floated through the metal. I don't know, but it started to sniff around or something, staying by the fence about 30 or 40 feet away, and then it went back through the fence, and you could see it rustling through the long grass that it ran back up towards the hill on. And then we heard the noise again, but it was different this time. A higher pitch this time, and literally sounded like a person screaming, but it was a lot further away. We honestly didn't know what to think, and we didn't panic, which was surprising, and we all just kind of froze in shock. The next day, we went back up to the memorial, and as we were going for some reason, a French uniformed officer with an armored vest and a cap on comes up to us as we were walking to the entrance. He was armed, a small pistol tucked into a holster on his belt. I know a gun when I see it, and he said that we need to leave, that we aren't allowed in, and that was that. It was really strange, but that was pretty much all that happened. We carried on with our trip, and I forgot about it, but thinking back on the whole thing, it's just really weird. So at the start of the year, we were all introduced to our teachers. All of them were pretty good teachers too, except for Mrs. C. So we went through our classes, and each time we went to one, we had to go through those cheesy beginnings of the year introductions, and It was quickly clear that her class wouldn't be a normal health class, as evidenced by the fact that during her introduction, she went off about how terrible her divorced husband was. Classes started picking up, and her insecurity somehow kept making it into lectures too, and one day, a few weeks into school, she just stopped showing up to class. You know, her job, consistently. Now, at this point, everyone was cutting her some slack because she was a single mum, but it just got worse. We would have to do whole units from a workbook with improvised substitutes who were actually most of the time school staff with no idea what they were doing. And this culminated when Mrs. C missed 2 weeks of school for just no apparent reason. Most of the class could see her mental deterioration, and me and some friends in class started noticing some form of distress from Mrs. C too. More and more stuff about her personal life would leak into lectures that she was there for, and suddenly it just all came to a head. She suddenly just became distant and developed a really tough shell around her. Mrs. C actually started coming to class consistently too, and she started bringing her kids, closer to toddlers but still, to class. I have a hunch that she started doing this to help justify her inaction to her employers, and one day she just sort of broke down in class about how horrible her husband was and was not taking equal responsibility for her kids and all that. It was a bad joke at this point. I mean, how long would Mrs. C last before she just got fired? Unluckily for us, it was too long. We just sort of endured lectures from this really mentally unstable woman for quite some time. Mind you, she was doing a fine job at suppressing traits associated with what was going on around other school employees. So one day, we come in and she just wasn't in class, breaking her streak of actually coming. And we finally got our answer of just how long she was going to last. A counsellor walked into the room and everyone knew what was up. She was gone. But what had gone down exactly? Well, apparently she walked into her ex-husband's house on the Sunday before the class period. Her excuse to her ex was to deliver cold medication to her kids, and after threatening to call the cops after her home invasion, she locked herself in the bathroom. She called the cops and unlocked the door to the bathroom, and she then walked over to her coat, pulled out a gun, and opened fire on her ex's girlfriend, killing her. Mrs. C then pinned everyone into the house until the cops showed up, and that wasn't her first offense either. This obviously all occurred suspiciously close to the time when she hardly showed up to a job, and she apparently had several assault charges against her that she somehow managed to keep secret to her job as a teacher. Weirdly enough too, the students who didn't have her as a teacher didn't really take it seriously, and it took less than 30 minutes after that info was made public to the students in general for them to just make a meme page about the incident. It was weird how that worked, and anyway, it got taken down. This actually happened to me just last night, and I'm still pretty shaken up by the experience, and I promptly quit this terrible part-time job right after it. So, I work at a retail store in a not-so-nice part of town. Since the area isn't the best, not many people ever come into the store, and even less people come in at night. Something important to note too is that the store doesn't have any cameras, nor does it have a panic button. So basically, anyone could do anything, and we've had many people steal little things here and there, and looking back, this should have been my first clue to just quit ASAP. Working this night shift was me, a very small girl, and my co-worker, basically the exact same height and build as me. But we were joking around and just playing on our phones because it was about 7:30 PM at this point, and no one had come in for about an hour, and suddenly a group of people, 2 men and 1 woman, come in all at once. A side note about these people too is that they were all wearing black head to toe, facial tattoos, and were very, very confrontational upon arrival. But the woman was a very husky woman, and I was honestly very intimidated by her. Her friends, the 2 men, were at least 6 foot each, towering over both me and my co-worker, who were both 5'3". One of the men immediately asks us what our ages were and complimented me on my smile. I'm kind of awkwardly laughing and trying to be as kind as possible to get these people to leave fast. The woman, she basically corners my coworker over in one of the aisles, so she's unable to walk over to where I am, which is right behind the counter. The woman is basically yelling at my coworker, asking her, "Why don't you hire me? I need to work, hire me," and pretty much scaring the crap out of both of us. While this is going on too, one of the men walks over and blocks the door, and the other man comes up to the counter and looks at all the $100 and $300 items we've stocked behind the counter and jokes to his friend about how he needs all of these items. He then turns to me and says with a deadpan face, "Give me everything." I awkwardly laugh at first and say, "Everything?" And then he says nothing and just continues to stare right into my face for 5 more seconds before repeating, "Everything." And so I just do that. I start to take things off the shelves while he points to things, saying, "Give me this, give me that, and that." And then he just stops and says, "You never asked me how I was going to pay for any of this." The entire time his friends are just saying nothing and standing still while just staring at me. The man then breaks his stare and laughs, prompting all of his buddies to laugh along with him, and states that they're going to come back. And as soon as they leave, I make a beeline to the door and I lock it. I call my manager and tell her what happened, and I'm just begging her to let us close because I do not want these people to come back. And, as if on cue, they come back and yank on the door, which is locked, and continue to try and get in. I tell my coworker to run with me to the back, and we lock the back room door and call the police. By the time the police arrive, they're gone, and nothing could be done because of the lack of any cameras in the store. The police did stay outside the store in their cars until we closed, and actually walked me to my car, which was nice of them. Throughout this whole ordeal, no one was in the store besides me and my coworker too. And my theory was that they were scoping out the situation before leaving and coming back with a firearm to actually carry out the robbery. Luckily, I had locked the door the moment they stepped out, and I don't like to think about what could have happened if I had brushed it off and just decided to leave the store open. But I was shaking like a leaf when they left, and I know they hadn't done really anything at all, but I trusted my gut feeling, and it was a good decision in the end. So anyway, I left the job soon after that because, well, money wasn't worth it. So, to start this, I need to tell you guys a little bit of backstory. So my husband and I lived in a big city in a teeny tiny house around 500 square feet or so. We were planning our wedding and starting a family soon, so we couldn't stay there anymore, and, well, I couldn't, but he was okay with it. But anyway, we had dreams of moving out into the country, and we found such an amazing deal on 320 acres that we just had to go and check it out. We emailed the realtor, and she had said that the lady living there wasn't quite ready to show the house yet. She really didn't want to sell, so she wasn't sure when she could show it. We asked if we could come and see the land, and the house would be fine until we could build our dream home further away from the highway anyway, so we go as excited as ever, and we pull up and get out of our truck. All you could hear were these birds and the wind, and it was just so peaceful and quiet in comparison to city life. And we knew immediately that this was going to be our home. The realtor arrived and the owner wasn't home, so she showed us the house. It was 1,300 square feet, so it honestly felt like a mansion to us, and the lady who owned it was 80-some years old and lived on the property alone. Her children actually wanted her to move closer to them for fear of something could happen to her, and she would always go out into the field on her quad, not trusty at all, or in some sort of beat-up old van. Anyway, inside of her house were these pictures of just saints everywhere. She was Haitian, and I got the kind of voodoo vibe, but not at all in a negative kind of way. So we go to explore the outbuildings, and one of them has this chair, a ton of burnt-out candles, and some knives. More voodoo vibes again, but not negative. It's a religion, and I'm not one to judge what people believe and all that, but we ended up meeting the lady, and she took us out on her quad to see the land. It stalled a few times. She was really fun and upbeat, and she also seemed to like my husband and myself, so we made an offer, and we actually got the house. We had a bunch of friends help us move November 2016, and I burned sage in the house because that's just something that I do, and I never got any bad vibes or anything, but I just did it to clear it out for our belongings. I had a friend with me at the time too, and she actually said that she saw a shadow move, so she also went over to the house with sage just to be safe. We do know that someone died on the property, cutting trees down apparently, so I wanted to be on the safe side too. Another friend of mine got a really creepy vibe that night too. They stayed on the main level bedroom, and she said that the entire night it just felt like someone was watching her. On the main level in the original house, there's the bedroom, the kitchen, the living room, and an oversized pantry. There was an addition on the main level, and it had the dish pit, aka sink, and cupboards, but not enough room for a table. It also had the bathroom and its own little cellar basement. The original basement looks like something out of a dungeon with just giant boulders, and it was completely unfinished. The pillars holding the beams up are trees rather than 4x4s, and it's very rustic, and honestly, I love it. But it can give off some weird vibes, I guess. I'm no stranger to paranormal activity, as I grew up in a haunted house, but that's another long story, but my husband has always been a huge skeptic. The beat-up, falling apart old barn always creeped me out, though. I just never liked it, and I always avoided it. Half of the roof was caved in anyway, and it looked a little like a scene from a horror movie, to be honest, and it even creeped out my husband a bit. He felt like something was always going to jump out at him when he was fixing things in there. Anyway, so on to the paranormal bits now. So, I can't remember really when this started, as much as it just happened in the few years we lived there. But it all seemed to begin when I was walking into the living room and passed by the basement stairs. I saw a black dog, almost pit bull shaped I think, sitting at the bottom of the stairs with just red eyes. I did a double take, and as soon as I looked back, it wasn't there. I went into the basement thinking that it was our big dog, mastiff Rottweiler Shepherd Lab Cross, but he wasn't there, and he was in the dish pit. So I tell my husband, and I just kind of shake it off. I must admit that I did feel a bit uneasy about it, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it too. At the next event, I actually have a miscarriage. I'm not sure how long after this, maybe a few months I think. So I'm actually in a pretty dark place. But we also had a falling out with a close friend that ended up being pretty messy, and some huge negative family drama with an in-law. The in-law is very verbally abusive and manipulative and all that good stuff. Anyway, a few months later, my husband has to go work a job overnight in another province. The first night by myself in the house too, and it was really creepy. I just felt so uneasy the entire night, and I was so thankful that he was only gone the one night too. It just felt like I wasn't alone, and my dogs were a little on edge too, and it was super windy and stormy out, and it was a perfect scene for a horror movie, so I just went to bed early and I slept it away. So carry on again, and I'm pregnant once more. Our baby boy was growing wonderfully. Our two old dogs, Japanese chins, had some crazy dental work done, and they weren't happy campers. So they were up all night, and my pregnant self was tired and cranky. So I took my Yorkie poo to the main level guest bed to sleep, and she was pretty restless. And she kept looking to the corner of the room and then moving to different parts of the bed trying to get comfortable. Always to sit up and look at the corner too. This is the bedroom my friend had just really negative vibes from, and so my Yorkie poo started growling at the corner of the room. So we just noped out of there pretty quickly, and I suffered a sleepless night with our recovering dogs, and it was super dark and you couldn't see anything in the room. And then we had a music festival on our property in June. It was fun, and it all kind of related to this in the future. My lovely baby boy decided to be a breech baby and kicked my nerves all the time to the point that I couldn't walk, so I started maternity leave early at 36 weeks, due end of July 2018. So I'm home now pretty much all day. But the house felt just so different than just being home on evenings and weekends too. It felt like a heaviness was there, and I also couldn't go into the basement if it was dark out, only in the daytime, and I just got this feeling that something bad would happen if I did. But I constantly felt like I was being watched too, and if the small dogs were in our bedroom with the Yorkie poo, they would bark and growl at anyone coming up the stairs, which was a really new behavior for them. And this is when I started getting feelings like I was being followed up the stairs. Anyway, a baby boy was born, and he's a night owl, so I'm up a lot in the night, which isn't normal for me. Our top floor is 3/4 story, so there's a storage space where the walls are, because at that corner angle of the roof and all that. And in the baby boy's bedroom, there's an opening with no door. I actually feed him in this room so as not to disturb the husband, as he's still going to work at this point. And it always feels like something's watching and just waiting in there. I would always avoid looking at it because I felt like if I did, that I would see glowing eyes or something worse, and even just walking the hallway between bedrooms is really uncomfortable during these nighttime feedings. And it was at this point that I ended up starting to see this shadow following me, which was really creepy, and it just defied all of science. I always tried to debunk things that I saw so as not to work myself up into a frenzy, but these shadows, they were also just really large, and they'd be as tall as the ceiling, 10 foot sometimes, and were disproportionate looking. I would try to recreate the shadows with my steps, but it never worked. And as for the feelings, I always tried to make myself believe that it was in my head, just an overactive imagination, but sometimes knocking would come from the basement too, especially when the internet wasn't working and our modem and router were actually in the basement. And that was always awful because I had to work up a lot of nerve to go and fix the internet, as it was my lifeline without cable. We actually ended up moving the guest bed into the basement at some point, and I was going to sleep there one night so I could catch up, and my husband was going to feed the baby boy at night, so I settled up in the basement, get all comfy and cozy and excited for a good night's sleep. I turn off the lights, and there's this green light on the ceiling. It's fading in and out slightly, but in no regular kind of pattern, so I'm thinking that it must be a reflection on the ducting or something like that. I turn on the lights, and it's solid wood where the green light was, and there also isn't any green light to cause a reflection. I looked around for quite some time to try and find an explanation for this light, but there was just no reason for it to be there. And at this point, I just kind of noped out of there, and I went into our travel trailer on a cold fall night. We also had another festival in September and ended up talking to someone that was there in June. So they're asking me about our other big black dog, and I'm like, there's just the one. And they're dead serious that they saw this big pit bull-like dog in the field at both festivals. And this kind of made me feel like I wasn't going crazy and that I actually did see something, and reassured me that what I was experiencing was real. But then it made me realize that I'm not crazy and that this is actually happening, and it was really scary. When my husband is at work, I'm very isolated, and our closest neighbor is a mile away, and all of our family lives an hour drive away. So I'm a little freaked out with everything going on, and I'm talking to local friends and city friends, and I actually get in touch with a medium at some point. She got me to text her a photo of the house, and she says that the land is bad, the house is bad, the dog is possibly a demon apparently, and she offered to come and help me salt the house for gas money. She actually never charged me for anything too, and she never told me why the land is bad, and to this day I'm still pretty curious. I also ended up getting a local church group to come and pray through the house, but nothing really did anything. But they told me some crazy stories of other houses that they had blessed, so the area was apparently pretty haunted or something. So I'm super unhappy still because my husband is about to leave for 8 weeks, and I don't want my son growing up in a haunted house like I did. I'm also really uncomfortable about being in the home and about being alone with our little guy. So someone gets me in touch with a shaman, and he comes and does his thing, and it was actually pretty cool to watch. He finishes up and tells me what he found, and there's apparently lots of shadow people, and they hide away in space upstairs, at the top of the stairs, and the bottom too, and basically everywhere where I felt like I was being watched and such. Apparently to this guy too, shadow people feed on negative thoughts. Also, I never explained specifics to him, so it was kind of neat that his findings matched my experiences. The shadow people weren't feeding off of me, but apparently rather my husband. But I am super sensitive, so I was getting all the bad vibes. The dog was, as he said, 80% gone, and if it wasn't, he would come back. He said the barn was awful and we should just burn it, and he set up a crystal grid around the property to protect us in the future from negative spirits. I know that this all may seem a bit crazy, but honestly, I was desperate at this point. We also talked about some of my past experiences too. I actually have quite a few, and we also talked about the previous owner. I feel as though her voodoo was actually used to protect her from what we were experiencing potentially. The shaman was actually lovely, and he gave me some blue corn for storing some of my crystals, and he also gave me some suggestions to help keep my sensitivity at bay. The shaman leaves, and husband comes home, says the house feels lighter, and he couldn't believe it. So fast forward a few months, and I'm watching Netflix with my little baby sleeping in my arms, and my husband comes and says that I saw something. Now, that was a little vague, obviously, so I pry a bit. Apparently, he thought one of our little Japanese chins went into the bathroom. It was apparently a white and small thing that went in there, and our chins are black and white, so he follows, and the bathroom door was closed. He's so baffled, being the skeptic that he is, so I text the shaman up, and he says that he'll do his thing and get back to me. Anyway, he gets back to us and says that it's nothing to worry about, and sometimes I feel like things move through the house, but it's nothing like what we experienced at the beginning. There's no more shadows, no phantom dogs, and I can actually go into the basement at night now. I still don't like going down there at night because it's still a little creepy, but my husband isn't so skeptical anymore, and he kind of understands now. But boy, it was a wild ride from moving in here to over 2 years later. At least for now, all is calm in the home, but man, do I hope it stays this way.